This is Democracy Watch. Marc, we have some excellent reporting from your outlet, Democracy Docket, where we all know that there was news that 6 Republican states have now opted to send their National Guard into Washington, D.C., and those states are West Virginia, South Carolina, Ohio, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Tennessee. So Democracy Docket, your outlet, then asked those governors how they would feel if other states would send troops into their states to deal with their crime problems. And so can you explain what happened when you asked these Republican governors how they would feel if the roles were reversed?
Yeah, it turns out that these governors who were all happy to issue press releases and be tough guy when it came to sending National Guard into other states, they didn't want to talk to Democracy Docket about their own state. The only one who even bothered to respond was a spokesperson for Governor Mike DeWine, and their answer was, frankly, just a bunch of sort of gobbledygook. But the spokespeople for Jeff Landry of Louisiana, Tate Reeves of Mississippi, Henry McMaster of South Carolina, Bill Lee of Tennessee, and Patrick Morrissey of West Virginia, they just didn't respond at all. So all of a sudden, having been big, tough talkers about D.C., when it came to, hey, how'd you like it if National Guard are deployed in your state, they kind of quieted up.
Can you speak about the irony of their silence in the face of this question, given the fact that, when it comes to DC's crime rate, it's actually eclipsed by the crime rates in some of these cities in these red states?
Yeah, that was actually the impetus for asking them, right? I mean, some of these governors have cities in their states with much, much higher crime rates. The DC crime rate is not the lowest in the country, but it is by far and away not the highest in the country. This is something you have talked about repeatedly on your YouTube channel, and so we thought it was important to ask them. And the fact that they are such tough talkers when it comes to Washington, D.C., and so silent when it comes to themselves is like reminiscent of J.D. Vance, hanging out behind the Secret Service at Union Station saying how scared he is to walk outside.
Yeah.
Pete Hegseth, same thing. All of these Republicans are super tough talkers. They talk about being alpha males, right, and they're going to have push-up contests, and they're going to, send in the military.
But God forbid they have to. But God forbid they have to step out their front door, walk off the stoop in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, right. They're petrified little children.
Yeah.
And the same with these governors. These governors are tough talking about deploying the National Guard, but when it comes to telling their own constituents the truth, right? When it comes to saying, hey, we actually have a bigger crime problem here in our state, so maybe we should do this here, they don't want to talk about that.
Well, this was excellent reporting by Democracy Docket. I'm going to put the link to Democracy Docket right here on the screen. For those who are looking for fearless, independent journalism, this is a great outlet. It's something that I use on a daily basis. That was the impetus for this video right here. So I'm going to put that on the screen and in the post description as well. If you're not yet subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe. Marc, this is similar to a different story that's in the news right now, and that is that Donald Trump is now looking to deploy the military, not just in LA, not just in Washington, D.C., but 19 states in total. And so can you talk about the dangers that are posed by virtue of kind of normalizing America to this idea that the military is going to be a constant presence on the streets?
Look, Donald Trump wants to put the military on the streets in every blue city in the country for 2 reasons. Number one, it makes him feel tough. Right? He feels like that's what autocrats do. And by the way, he's right. That is what autocrats do.
Yeah.
And by the way, what cowards do is if they're in the legislature of the same party, they stay silent. So, John Thune and his caucus and Mike Johnson and his caucus, they're cowards, right? Because they won't say boo about what Donald Trump is doing. But Donald Trump is doing, number one, because he wants to be an autocrat. But number two, and I just kind of shout this at the top of my lungs or maybe whisper it, I don't know. He's putting the troops, he's putting the National Guard, he's putting federal law enforcement, he's flooding them into these blue cities because when we get to the 2026 elections, he wants them in place. Donald Trump does not believe in free and fair elections. He does not want free and fair elections. He keeps talking about various ways for there not to be free and fair elections, whether it is what he's done in Texas, whether it is the fact that he says that he wants to do with mail-in voting, the fact that he said that he thinks that Republicans, if he gets his way, can gain 100 seats. Well, how the hell is he going to get 100 seats? The other way he's going to gain 100 seats is by taking over the counting and the tabulation of ballots. By the way, that language is directly from his social media post. He said He believes the states are his agents in the counting and the tabulations of ballots. And so one of the ways you take over all these things, Brian, is by deploying massive federal resources, including federalizing the National Guard and putting them in these blue cities. This is a five-alarm fire facing our democracy, and the legacy media finds every damn excuse it can to cover something other than this. I think the Washington Post just had a headline about how, Donald Trump always wanted to be a mayor, and now he's essentially the mayor of Washington, D.C. I mean, give me a fucking break.
Yeah. Where do we stand in terms of any lawsuits that might preclude Trump's ability or limit Trump's ability to be able to deploy so freely the military into American cities?
Look, you were really early on this. In part because you care about this issue and you care about democracy, but also because you live in L.A. We saw this first in L.A., and L.A. is the test case. Yeah. And Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, kudos to him for this. I mean, I can give him a lot of props for what he's doing about redistricting as well. But he said, I'm not going to allow this to happen in my state, in Los Angeles, without a court fight. So Gavin Newsom himself is a plaintiff, is the lead plaintiff in a case challenging what we are seeing in Los Angeles that is now going to spread like wildfire every place else. There was a trial. Democracy Docket covered that trial. We are awaiting a decision from the trial court. And this is for all the marbles, because if he can get away with this in a city the size of LA, with the lack of a predicate for it, right? I mean, what we saw in LA were, as far as I could tell, very isolated, disorder, largely because of ICE raids.
Correct. In direct response to his own incitement. So he basically created some very tenuous predicate for him to be able to then respond with an escalation. And that's what he did by sending in these troops.
Yeah. And in that case in LA, there is no factual dispute that the Los Angeles Police Department was more than equipped to handle whatever law enforcement needs there were. And if they didn't have the resources, which, again, there is no dispute that they did, but if they didn't, then the state of California had other police at its disposal that could have provided backup. So there wasn't a need for what Donald Trump did other than to create an excuse to do so. So Gavin Newsom has brought this to court. We are waiting on the judge to rule. And if Gavin Newsom loses this, then I won't say all hope is lost, because I never believe in all hope is lost. There's always live to fight another day. But man, it's going to be hard to find a better set of facts than he has in California. But again, the fight will go on. But I'm hoping that he wins that case, because then that will be a big impediment, particularly if that goes up to higher courts and creates precedent that is more binding elsewhere. But that'll be a big case.
So just specifically on that case, because I know that there was an effort to get some preliminary injunction that would immediately eject these National Guard troops from Los Angeles. They lost that effort. Governor Newsom lost that effort. So does that kind of signal something? Does that offer some prediction as to how the judge might rule now that they're in the actual trial over this thing?
Look, you always prefer to win preliminary relief when you're seeking permanent relief. So, I'm not going to spin that. But one of the things that you as a lawyer have to always trade off in seeking preliminary relief is that you're not going to be able to put on a full evidentiary record, right? What do I mean by that? If you seek a preliminary injunction, you are going to a judge on an expedited basis, and you're saying there is this emergency that you have to rule on now. And by definition, that means the court is not going to hear live testimony. You're not going to have depositions. You're not going to have expert testimony. You're not going to have a full presentation of the facts. The judge is going to have to decide it on the law and sort of a much, much more limited factual record. That's the downside of preliminary relief. So in this case, the trial judge actually ruled in favor of the governor, and then the Ninth Circuit reversed. And this is going to be now positioned by the trial judge for the Ninth Circuit on a full evidentiary record. And it is not unusual to lose a preliminary injunction where you have to show that you are likely to win on the merits, but also you have to show that it's in the public interest that the judge rule in your favor on this sort of very expedited basis. And that's a higher burden than you have after a full trial, where it is then based on a full evidentiary record.
let's say that Trump loses this case in the district court in California, and he opts to appeal it to the appeals court. Does he shoulder some risk by virtue of appealing this thing? Because once you appeal it, and if they rule also in Newsom's favor, then all of a sudden you have precedent, and that can apply to, if he tries to deploy the military in Milwaukee and Detroit and Philadelphia and Atlanta and any of these other swing states as we head toward, the 2026 and 2028 elections, where Trump would obviously want some good precedent to help him deploy these troops. But now if you have bad precedent that prevents the deployment of these troops, that would serve as a huge impediment to him.
Yeah, so we have seen Donald Trump and Pam Bondi and the Department of Justice play a lot of gamesmanship here. They, in some cases, have clearly either not appealed or have slow-walked their appeal for precisely the reason you say. So is it possible that Donald Trump, if he loses the trial court, says, you know what, I'll just pull the troops out of L.A.? I'll say I don't need them there right now. I'll pull the National Guard out right now, say I don't need them there right now, and then moot this case. Say basically this case ends at the trial court, all over. And then I can deploy them back in LA, by the way, but I can deploy them in other cities and back in LA some later date and say, well, that first case is not precedent because that was a different set of facts and it was only the trial court, right? Like we've watched in a variety of arenas where it's clear the Trump administration is not eager to take these cases up on appeal. On the other hand, in other cases, we've seen them want to, fast track these to the U.S. Supreme Court because they think they can get a favorable ruling. I don't know where they'd line up here. It would not shock me, given how weak their argument is in L.A., that they wouldn't actually pull back and not want to appeal, and they'd actually pull the troops out and they do everything I just said, because if from their standpoint, they may want the DC case actually to go up because their facts there are better. Like the fact is the law is better in District of Columbia. It's not necessarily the facts are better. The law is better because it's a federal city. It's not a state. There isn't a governor. But for that exact reason, wouldn't that not be an analogous case to Donald Trump being able to deploy the military into the actual states? Like we know he has more latitude when it comes to DC because of the Home Rule Act, but that's not the case in any of the actual states across the country. Right, which would, again, be a reason why if he decided to retreat in the California case, if he lost at the trial court, it might very well be to let the D.C. case advance because he's got better law, and then to tuck another state case after that rather than leading with a state case. I don't know. Putting myself into the head of Donald Trump is always painfully impossible. Yeah. Even trying to think this through the way Pam Bondi might think about it is impossible because Pam Bondi is just the mouthpiece and the puppet of Donald Trump. Right. Well, look, I mean, first of all, there is hardly any coverage on this ongoing case that's happening in California, and the downstream effects of if Trump wins and if Trump loses in this case in California are going to be cataclysmic here, especially as it relates to the 2026 election. You have been relentless in terms of covering this on your YouTube channel, Democracy Docket. Highly recommend for anybody who's watching right now, if you are not yet subscribed to Marc's YouTube channel, not only to get this good information, but also to support one of the fighters. And there's nobody fighting harder on the front lines than Marc and his team. So I'm going to put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description. If you're not yet subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. I'll put the link to my channel on the screen as well, so it doesn't cost anything to subscribe to both channels. Great way to support our work and a great way to support independent media. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen. I'm Marc Elias. This is Democracy Watch.